Association and others. Call Arlene and Dave 352-239-1032. 352-239-1032.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA. Ocala.
All right, just about 4 minutes after 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Tuesday morning. Every now and then, the death penalty conversation comes up, and we're going to talk about it again. Philip Gibbons is on the phone. He is a journalist, and he has contributed to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, something called Smoke Magazine, France Today, Extra. He's an award-winning documentary filmmaker and screenwriter, etc. And I guess as a side note, he won $500,000 on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Have to ask him what the losing question was.
Yeah.
Once you get to that level, they're not easy. The one thing I want to say real quickly. Oh, he's got a film. That's important to tell you.
Yes.
It's an award-winning documentary film called "The Devil and the Death Penalty," chronicling over 40 years of the state of California's capital punishment controversy. So let me just tell you my thoughts on the death penalty real quickly. Not that my thoughts really matter, because I am a hypocrite when it comes to this topic, and here's why. And that's the only thing I want to tell you before we go to Philip Gibbons. When it comes up and it's kind of a generic conversation, what do you think about the death penalty? Then I become this intellectual, and I say, well, I think it's cruel, and I don't think we should do it, and I feel very benevolent, I guess, toward somebody who may have taken somebody else's life. Well, perhaps it was a misunderstanding or an accident or something stupid like that. That's me being stupid, okay? But then when I find out the details about somebody who's about ready to, be given an injection that'll end their life or electrocute or whatever, and I find out the torturous, heinous, is the word heinous?
Yes.
Heinous things that have been done, sometimes to young children, or any age group, it doesn't matter. If somebody's done something horrible, then all of a sudden I'm all for it. So that's why I say I'm a hypocrite, is because in one breath, when we're not talking about a specific case, I become this, intellectual. I become this sophisticated. We don't kill people in our society anymore.
Yes.
But then when I find out that somebody's life was really destroyed, not to mention the lives of their loved ones, then I'm all for it. I don't know how Philip Gibbons feels on it. He studied it more than I have, obviously. Philip Gibbons, good morning. What an interesting topic for sure. Thank you for being on the air with us, Philip. Good morning.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Where are you right now?
I'm in beautiful downtown Burbank, which actually doesn't really have a downtown, and I'm probably dating myself. But,
yeah, but I know what you mean. I've been to Burbank. I was out there for a while, yeah. I used to say that, too, when I would be there. I'm in beautiful downtown. Where did that come from? Was that from Laughing?
Johnny Carson.
Johnny Carson would say it. Okay.
Wow.
The NBC studio still is in Jay Leno and all was in Burbank.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's right. But they're not there anymore. They went back to New York, right?
That's correct.
What are they doing there now?
Well, there's all kinds. There's even like local news production. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on in the building. Okay. So,
well, that's not what you're on the air to talk about. So the Devil and the Death Penalty. Tell me about the film. The film has already been seen in some cities, right?
Well, the film has been in film festivals in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles, but it's now currently released on iTunes. And for those who are into Stone Age technology like myself, it's also available on DVD through our website, thedevilandthedeathpenalty.com. But it basically recounts the dysfunction in the California death penalty system through the crimes of an individual named Lawrence Bittaker, who in 1979, with his accomplice Roy Norris, murdered, raped, and tortured 5 teenage girls between the ages of 13 and 18. And the prosecutor who prosecuted both him and Charles Manson called him worse than Manson. And this individual, Steve Kay, is interviewed throughout our film.
Wow. And so when you say dysfunctional, what happened that was dysfunctional?
Well, we made a whole documentary about this, but in a nutshell, for the benefit of your audience, in 1978, because the California State Supreme Court had twice invalidated capital punishment in California, and that's how people like Charles Manson avoided a death sentence. The public basically passed a referendum which made it impossible for the state courts to invalidate capital punishment unless another popular referendum removed capital punishment. So what has happened is every year 10 to 25 people get sentenced to death in California, and yet the courts and also people within the state bureaucracy have really no intention of executing these people. And so what you have now is the largest contingent of death row population in the United States, with about 700, as we sit here, about 748 people are on death row. There's a current moratorium on any execution in the state of California based on a case in 2006, which maybe we can discuss. But it's a stalemate in which the public wants one thing and the people behind the scenes want something else. And that's kind of what one of the things that our film deals with.
Okay, and are you trying to make a point or send a message that, hey, if you're going to put somebody on death row, you should follow through with it?
I think initially the film started and pretty much deals with the case of Lawrence Bittaker, who at the time this was a very notorious crime. It was the first case that ever was televised in California, first courtroom case ever televised. And it answers the question, when I lived in Hermosa Beach where these crimes took place, it's a small beach town, it kind of answered the question when I would hear about what this guy had done from local residents. I'd always conclude these conversations with, how come this guy's never been executed? And they would just kind of shrug their shoulders and say, we have no idea. And so I kind of set out to answer that question. But in answering that question, you had to deal with the whole capital punishment issue in California at large.
And that means that the judges are being complacent about this also, because can't they be some of the movers to get this law into place for capital punishment?
I don't think, I think complacent is probably not a strong enough word. In fact, in the Bittaker case, basically since 2006, the federal district court judge who basically is presiding over this appeal has not moved the case forward in any meaningful way. In other words, he's literally done nothing in 8 years, so that the case can't really move up. Normally what happens is he would, listen to oral arguments and then issue an opinion, and that case would then be appealed through the Ninth Circuit Court and possibly to the Supreme Court. But because he's done absolutely nothing, the case is just sitting there. And Lawrence Bittaker, basically, again, one of the most notorious serial murders in the history of the state, is basically sort of getting a free ride from this particular judge. But that's only there's 748 people on death row, and even on my website there are people who are probably done things that are as despicable as what Bittaker did, and yet the public pretty much has forgotten about a lot of them.
Was Bittaker just as guilty as his accomplice?
His accomplice really escaped a death penalty only because he cut a deal and pled guilty, and he got 45 years to life with the possibility of parole. But honestly, he'll never be paroled. He had his first parole hearing in 2009, which he didn't even participate in, and he's not eligible for another parole hearing until 2019. And he's in there's a sort of a celebrity prison in Corcoran, which is a maximum security prison in California, with people like Charles Manson and Sirhan Sirhan, and he's currently in that unit because he and Bittaker within the prison system are very notorious people.
I'm very honest about me being a hypocrite when it comes to my feelings about the death penalty. One of the things that fuels my hypocrisy is the occasional story about the death row inmate that will be exonerated because of DNA evidence after spending a decade or more on death row. All of a sudden they say, "Oh, he didn't even do it," and that guy could have been put to death. So then I'm once again against the death penalty. I go back and forth on this one all the time. And you cover some people, don't you? Who are, if they weren't exonerated, at least you're not sure about.
Well, we don't. We try to focus on this one case, and we also, I think that within our documentary, let's put it this way: this is somewhat contrarian in that all we really do is I didn't want to make it into a kind of a diatribe or even really appear to be taking any kind of a perspective. Although the material I think is meant to basically transmit or communicate a certain message. However, in terms of that sort of an issue, which, by the way, again, you could make I think an entire documentary about that issue. I would say that basically all we really wanted to do was stick to this case and have people draw their own conclusions. I would say, though, in terms of, I understand, especially in places like Illinois and to some degree in Texas, there is some controversy about potential innocent people on death row. In 2010, as the Attorney General, he's now the governor again, Jerry Brown, but he made the statement as the Attorney General that there are, quote, no innocent people on death row in California. And Jerry Brown, who is probably one of the strongest anti-capital punishment politicians in the history of the state and maybe the country, if he said that and he made that statement, then I would have to agree with him, at least in California, and that's what we try to stick to. And in this documentary is pretty much what's happening in California. Alabama, Texas, Florida, again, Illinois has a history, as you mentioned, of that kind of incident happening, but we tend to steer clear of that in this film.
Since Stephen Kay was part of your documentary, is he still able to be a part of the legal system? Is he still prosecuting?
Stephen Kay is retired, and in fact, one of the reasons it took a long time for me to make the film was I had trouble locating him because Stephen Kay at one point had put more people on death row than any other prosecutor in the state. So when I tried to contact him through official channels, and by the way, put many other people in prison, needless to say, the official authorities at the DA's office were not willing to really give me any information about him. But ultimately, I was able to contact him. But at this point he's a private citizen, and I'm actually worked very closely with him on the film.
Wow!
Oh my gosh!
See, I would want to too. Again, this is my hypocrisy. Now I want these guys. I mean, just pull the switch or whatever. I'm looking through the material that was sent to us, and among the things that were sent are the prints of the Polaroid pictures that these guys took of the girls that they eventually killed. They took these pictures themselves.
Those Polaroids were recovered basically when Norris cut a deal. He basically described some of the places where they had buried this material. Now, the other thing that the Polaroids are very disturbing, but I again, for the benefit of your listening audience, I think you probably or may have also read about an audio tape that makes this case again quite notorious because twice Norris and Bittaker recorded them torturing and raping two of their victims, and one of those audio cassettes was recovered and played in open court. And when it was played in open court, not only did many spectators rush out of the courtroom, but also hardened sheriff's deputies also left. The jury, was basically in tears. They had to be removed into the judge's chambers and told them, you haven't even heard the defense. I know that the judge basically said, you haven't heard the defense's side of this. You can't really leap to any conclusions right now. We have footage in the movie of that incident, and also Steve Kay being interviewed in the hallway and essentially bursting into tears himself. It's that tape, by the way, is played at the FBI Academy for incoming Academy, students, for lack of a better word, so that I guess the purpose so claimed by the FBI is that so people understand exactly what crime really is and how some of the people they may be dealing with in their future.
Was the defense publicly appointed, or were they able to hire their own attorneys?
Interesting that you bring that up, because Bittaker's appeal now basically rides on ineffective counsel. His counsel was the president of the Los Angeles County Defense Bar Association, was appointed specifically by the judge because he wanted to make sure that ineffective counsel was not going to be a grounds for appeal, and there were some conflicts of interest with Roy Norris, who'd been represented by a people's defendant. And so, unfortunately, this person at the time was in his late 60s, and as the case has moved on, he's even alive. He's now in his early 90s, but he's essentially mentally infirm. So when Bittaker's attorneys have deposed him, he seems confused and bewildered. And so that's basically what they're trying to hang this whole ineffective counsel defense on.
Oh, my God.
Wow. The documentary film that Philip D. Gibbons is talking about, and you're the creator of the film. Do we say director?
I'd say with some other folks, I'm the producer and I am the director of the film, The Devil and the Death Penalty.
And there you go. So, and we can download this off of the internet, or
you can go to iTunes and should be, if you've got access to that, it's for the price of a cup of coffee. You can take a look at it, or if you want a copy of it through DVD means, you can get on our website and we can send it to you quickly.
And again, I know I asked this already. I think I did, but are you trying to make a case? And before I was unclear. I thought it was a broader. I mean, this is about Lawrence Bittaker, right? Am I saying the name right?
Correct.
Specifically. So are you making a case to go ahead and pull the switch on this guy, or?
Again, we don't, it's very narrational. We just basically describe what he did. We describe what happened in his trial. We describe what it's like to be on death row. We describe specifically what happened with his specific appeals, and then we tell you exactly where the case is right now. And we tell you what happened to some of the key people in the case, the relatives of the victims. By the way, the detective who was responsible for essentially arresting or getting Norris and Bittaker, bringing their attention to law enforcement, he was a detective by the name of Paul Bynum. 8 years after the case, he committed suicide, and his suicide note referenced the fact that he thought that Bittaker and Norris would get out of jail and would basically murder him and his family, and obviously he'd suffered a mental breakdown, which was related directly to being involved in this case. So it may seem far-fetched, again, for your listeners, that somebody would get off of death row, but based on what was going on in the 80s in California, there were defendants who were literally having their sentences changed and being paroled. So it was not something that was as far-fetched as it might seem right now.
Wow. Philip D. Gibbons is our guest. And Philip, it sounds like to me that if I watched this movie, I would end up wanting this guy dead. That's what it feels like to me. And the other guy too. I don't understand how come he's not as
Norris.
Yeah, how come he's not as considered as bad? He seems just as bad to me.
Well, we could spend a long time on that, and that was when I first met with Steve Kay. That had always been one of my questions, and the way that he explained it to me was that initially, when they had no bodies, which they did not, they had a political climate where a lot of convictions for first-degree murder were being overturned by the California State Supreme Court, which is another lengthy story. But basically, Steve Kay said, I figured I'd get one guy that I'd put away for life. I'd also have him testify against Bittaker, and frankly, I had a much weaker case than people realized. Especially, it seems, even with the audio cassette and with some of the evidence, it seems like it would be a slam dunk. But without bodies, which in those days, I think there had only been one other successful prosecution of a defendant where no body had been recovered, that it was something that I almost had to do. And luckily Norris didn't realize that, and Bittaker has always realized that, because he has attempted for years to get Norris to withdraw his testimony and try to get a new trial based on that particular legal maneuver. But Norris has for many reasons we probably can't get into, Norris has never done that.
Did you speak to the families of the girls?
I did have communications with them. It basically became clear to me, especially in one instance. Now, by the way, for instance, the two girls who were kidnapped at one time, both of their mothers are deceased. Many of the people involved are deceased, but one woman in particular, who I won't identify, I basically contacted her, and it seemed really clear to me that our last communication, she basically said, I'd like to help you, but even 30 years later, this is really, really painful.
I bet, yeah.
And so, we just made the decision that we felt that it just was not something that we wanted to move forward with in a way that...
Yeah, I don't blame you. Yeah.
Yeah. Although we did, in the film, we do speak to, there were two individuals where Jackie Gilliam, who was one of the victims, was staying during the course of the summer in Redondo Beach with these. She was a friend of the daughter of some parents, and we did interview the two parents who were really the last people to see her alive.
Oh, my God.
They are in the film, and we tracked them down 30 years later.
One of the names in the notes is the name Leah Lamp, and
Correct.
And it says in my prep material, because of her youth, Leah Lamp was not raped by either of the men, but ultimately both were murdered, completely stripped of their clothing and possessions, and hurled off of the isolated cliff in Los Angeles. What it says, both of them, is that a misprint, or is there another name that should be there?
Both of them is the other young lady was Jackie Gilliam.
Oh, okay, that's the other name. Okay,
right, and Jackie Gilliam is the 15-year-old who was in the Polaroid pictures that you've seen.
When you approached Stephen Kay and got to have a one-on-one conversation with him, and he agreed to do this documentary, I imagine throughout the course of his time on the screen, he must have broken down a few times before he could compose himself to talk about it.
Well, he actually, while we do have footage of him from the footage I mentioned, he actually at this point, although for 2 years he had nightmares and still occasionally has nightmares, and actually had to he was taking medication literally because he also had to transcribe the audio cassette and had to listen to it many times. Oh. And one thing he while he was emotional, he was able. He was pretty composed. Remember, he is a professional prosecutor, and so he's a guy that, again, the fact that he would break down was pretty extraordinary at any time. But the thing that he did say to me in the first interview, the first time I ever met with him, was this was, we met for lunch when I had finally got him to agree to meet with me, and he sat down, he was really serious and very poker-faced. Our relationship changed a lot over time, but he said, the first thing I'm going to tell you is I don't have a copy of the tape. I won't help you get a copy of the tape, and it's my real hope and wish that you never listen to the tape, because it's something so horrible that once you get it into your mind, it will never, you'll never get it out.
So what happened when you did listen to it?
Well, I never have listened to it.
Oh,
and
you
in
haven't?
Fact,
okay.
No, I haven't. I've read transcripts of it, and in the video footage that we have, you can kind of hear it in the background, and that's enough to indicate that he's right. And I never do want to listen to it.
Wow! But that's not. Is that on the video that the documentary?
Well, in the documentary, we have footage. We have basically footage of people leaving the court or fleeing the courtroom while the tape is being played. So you can sort of get a sense, but you can't really hear what's going on specifically.
And this film is doing more than just talking about the wanting of the death penalty and giving the example as to why. It's about making sure that all of the parents of children try to instill it in them to be as safe as they can. And this is just something you're doing for everybody in society.
Well, in the 70s, it was common for a lot of people to hitchhike in the Los Angeles area, and as a result of this and several other incidents, that practice stopped. But nowadays, children and teenagers seem to be a lot more blasé about situations they get into and people that they deal with. And so many people have seen the movie, have said, I want my daughter or my son even to see this film just so they understand that, some of the people who may be out there.
That's right.
Because
right.
one of the individuals was a young lady who was hitchhiking in Hermosa Beach, which was quite common. And, would probably obviously have no idea that something like this would happen to her.
We have here a bridge, a land bridge. It goes over the interstate, and it's a popular walking place. And I just tell people, all the women, do not walk that thing alone. There are creeps who walk that thing, and they're, 99.9% of the people in this world might be okay, but there's that. It only takes one. Mm-hmm. It only takes one, and wow. Well, and see, that's what I've always thought about the death penalty, just to kind of bring it back to this, is that if we were to use the death penalty, maybe it would stop the next guy from doing the same thing. But I don't know. Did you come to any conclusions at all regarding the effect of the death penalty on the potential next murderer?
I think that for me, the place that I've gotten to is, and I'm not a big believer, like I'm ambivalent like you are, and especially in places like Texas, where I think that they are completely 180 degrees opposite from California. I think the place that I'm at is, for the most part, I'm not so sure it has really any effect, but I think there are certain instances, and this is one of them, where it's not so much even for Lawrence Bittaker, who, by the way, is totally unrepentant himself, and almost in any interview is, in printed interviews, is almost mocking not only his victims but even the system at large. My feeling is that there are certain instances, and his is one of them, where not so much for him but for all the rest of us, there has to be some line that basically, and I think Steve Kay feels the same way, that there's just certain people that there just has to be some standard where people understand that if this is the type of thing that you're going to get involved with, you're going to have to pay a very serious penalty. But as you can see, in California, if you get on my website, there's 20 more people that I've described who are done things that are similar or even worse than Bittaker. And this is not, if you're on death row in California, you've done some truly horrible things. And so you wonder, last year there were 24 death sentences handed out in California. There were only 10 in the state of Texas. So it's not like they don't give it out. And as you mentioned, you wonder, is this thing really serving as any kind of a deterrent or having any purpose?
Wow, Philip Gibbons, you've held us spellbound for sure. The film is a documentary film. It's an award-winning film. It's called The Devil and the Death Penalty. The website. What is the website? TheDevilAndTheDeathPenalty.com. We're also we have sort of updates on Facebook, but if you want to get on there and like us on that would be fine. And there's a lot of information about this topic and news headlines, et cetera, on our website, as well as the DVD. And can I ask you about the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire thing?
Absolutely.
All right. What was the question you missed?
The question I missed was, in 1978, they changed the name from this to Walkman.
Oh! Oh, wow.
And the answers, I think the 4 answers, I think one was like pocket player, replayer, and the correct answer, which I did not know, was soundabout.
Oh, wow.
Oh, no, but you got $500,000 anyway.
I did.
Wow. That one question would have given you $1 million, right?
It would have. Now you can watch, and I didn't put it up there, but you can go to YouTube and you can watch the whole from beginning to end, and it was. Wow. I used all my lifelines at $8,000. So it was somewhat.
Philip, thank you for being on the air with us today. A very important topic: the devil and the death penalty. Go to the website, TheDevilAndTheDeathPenalty.com. Just Google it, Facebook it, you'll find it. And thank you, Philip. We'll be right back.
It was my pleasure. Okay, bye-bye.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. The White House defends the Bo Bergdahl swap for 5 Taliban members from Guantanamo Bay.
I wouldn't be doing it if I thought that it was contrary to American national security.
President speaking in Warsaw, Poland, telling reporters the U.S. would be in the position to go after the released detainees.
But Republican Senator